Okay, folks, it's time for the collection part 15, and we're down at the bottom rung here. Bottom rung is in location, not quality, of course. And here we go with a great book by Gottfried Ephraim Lessing, the great Leo Kuhn. An essay on the limits of painting and poetry. This is a classic. It was hailed at the time as such, and it is still viable and interesting to read. Some great stuff going on in here. Good stuff. And even this appendix is really good to it too. Calls up a lot of the material and goes over it. It's pretty good. Great appendix notes in this. Leo Kuhn. There's the famous. There it is, the snake, or the serpent, or whatever. Great stuff. Okay, next up is a great satirist, Lucian. These are the selected satires of Lucian Norton. Good stuff. The Fisherman, Dialogues for Courtesans, good. Courtesans, Charon, great. Voyage to the Underworld, Zeus the Opera Star, Dialogue of the Gods is hilarious. Lucius the Ass is a great stuff. A True Story is just one of the best. Lucian is hilarious. And something that it's not recondite, it's not arcane or any, you don't have to be a scholar to know what he's talking about. The stuff's funny. Okay, here's a fatter edition of Lucian, Chattering Courtesans and Other Sardonic Sketches. This is a more wide-ranging collection about the parasite, proof that parasitic is an art, great stuff. Defensive images, Toxeris or friendship, great stuff. The Scythian Honorary Council, great stuff. Again, Lucian is a treasure. Okay, here's the Lucretius volume that I talked about that was is in the poetic form on the nature of the universe. And I have the other vision up here on the nature of the universe too. This is a more true to the original form in Latin, and there's a couple of appendixes in here that are pretty valuable. Actually, 4 or 5 great textual notes too. This volume is more full. I would recommend it to the other one. Great stuff. Titus Lucretius Carus. Great. Okay, here we go with Pliny the Elder, father of Pliny the Younger. But true. Pliny the Younger, known for publishing a series of letters to important people. Pliny the Elder, Natural History, a selection. Of course, he died in Pompeii, where the famous volcano hit and all that stuff. Famous story. And this natural history is pretty interesting. We could call it would, if we just looked at the Western civilization and talked about it, we would say that Pliny the Elder was the first naturalist, but that's not necessarily so. But this is still an intriguing and interesting book. A lot of interesting stuff in this, and that's all I'm going to say. Good stuff. Okay, next up, great volume of Ben Jonson's plays, Volpone and Other Plays, Volpone and Other Plays. Jonson's plays are hilarious, very well done. Bartholomew Fair, The Alchemist is just awesome. Volpone, the Fox. Great stuff. Oh, fumble. Great stuff though. Love the cover painting here too. Little fool in the background with the nose, of course. And that's all I'm going to say about that one. Good stuff. Ben Jonson, very warm, kind of guy you'd want to take to a party, rock on tour, that kind of stuff. But also very, very learned. All right, next up, Modern Library edition of The Bostonians by Henry James. And not a bad novel by any means. Voluminous as all of his novels are. You're at least going to get 500 pages. Good stuff, though. James is a good novel writer. Some of his novels are better than others. Good stuff. Okay, this is a very interesting volume that I'm very happy I have. The Early Christian Writings. And this gives a view of some of the really earliest, like the Epistle of Barnabas, the Epistle of Diognetus, the Martyrdom of Polycarp, Ignatius to Polycarp, which is a letter, Ignatius to the Philadelphians, Ignatius to the Romans, Ignatius to the Magnesians, Ignatius to the Ephesians, and all this stuff. These are epistles, of course. Ignatius of Antioch, not the other one. And these are very interesting stuff. And a lot of the early Christian writings kind of, in some places, run counter to what we see in modern and even, the editions of the since the 16th, 17th century, the editions of the New Testament. Okay, I already have this in the Novels and Social Writings of London in the American Library edition. Here is Jack London's The Iron Heel, and I only got this because I love this artwork at the cover. I know it's brutal and stuff, but it's evocative and it's pretty interesting, and that's why I got it. And there's a blurb from George Orwell, who is a snitch and a police informer and started out as a prison guard for the Empire. Orwell was scum. I just can't believe they would use. But Jack London was a racist, thought black people were inferior, so nobody's perfect in this world. But again, The Iron Heel is an excellent novel, pretty salient to the days we are living in now, but not totally, just kind of a trend towards where we're going, with prisons bursting to full and, surveillance and all that other stuff. All right, here we go with an interesting volume that I got that I'm very happy I have. The Swedish August Strindberg's The Inferno and From an Occult Diary. This is during a time when he was having an emotional emotional breakdown. And The Inferno itself is an excellent book. Excellent read. And the Occult Diary is excellent too. If you've read his plays, forget that. When you read this, it's something totally different, and it's really, really interesting stuff. It's compelling and it's a quick read. I mean, even though it looks voluminous, you're on page 300 before you even realize it. You're like, wow, it's that kind of thing. Okay, here's a book that I'm not proud to have, but it's an interesting historical document. It's from the racist John Locke, the guy who supported the slave trade and all that. And he was whatever. The Two Treatises of Government. And it's an interesting read to see where the English mind, a lot of the official English thing was, and property and heritage. And he starts with Adam's title by fatherhood and by donation. Of course, he starts with the theological aim because he aims to obfuscate and legitimize slavery and other things, and the exploitation of labor by the wealthy, because that's who he served. Alrighty, here we go. This is an interesting novel by Henry James called The Tragic Muse, and once again, look at the cover work. This painting is just outstanding. Love it. And this is about a young Englishman. He goes into Parliament, and the other is a great actress and stuff, good stuff. The door's always knocking, and the place is always rocking around here. I'm going to write a song, baby. Okay, this is a great volume of a medieval history. Joinville and Villehardouin, The Chronicles of the Crusades, and this is a really great work and a fun and entertaining book. You would think it would be some dry history, blah, blah, blah. No, it is not. It's full of intrigue and great stories, and written in the 13th century, and some great stuff. I love this the cover art here. Good stuff. Can't recommend it enough. Hey, this is another edition of Ambrose Bierce's Devil's Dictionary, and I've said enough about that. Okay, next up, Alfred Jarry, again, one of my favorite authors, an absurdist and humorist. The Exploits and Opinions of Dr. Faustroll, Pataphysician, and it is a very fun ride to read this book, and a quick read. And every section is donated to has a little donation to a contemporary artist or writer, and sometimes to Noble, or to the Prayers of the Brahmins and all that stuff. Pierre Loti, good stuff. All right, next up is a novel that I probably won't get around to reading for a while, but got it. I heard it was good. Flame Trees of Thika, however you want to pronounce it, Elspeth Huxley. About a small farm, pioneering days of Kenya. So basically it's about English colonialism in Kenya. They used to collect severed heads and stuff. But I don't know where Elspeth Huxley stands on that. And so when I read it, I will definitely keep that in mind. Okay, here we go with Justinian's classic, The Digest of Roman Law, Theft, Rapine, Damage, and Insult. Very dry work, but nonetheless of immense historical value, and basically the framework, not exactly the detail, but the framework of future legal systems like common law and stuff like that. Very, very seminal work in the history of Western civilization. Next up, very hilarious, wonderful, poetic, Juvenal, the 16 satires, and these satires are sometimes very brutal. Talks about one daughter of a Roman emperor having, the niece of a Roman emperor having 4 abortions, and they all look like, the aborted fetuses all look like her uncle, who was the emperor at the time. A lot of scatological stuff, a lot of great humor, a lot of wow. It's a ride. Juvenal or Juvenal, however you want to pronounce it, just outstanding poetry, and a lot of vitriol, and righteous about the corruptions of Rome and stuff like that. Okay, next up is a great and seminal volume about living in Nazi Germany. A Jewish man, courageously wrote a diary of the Nazi years. I Will Bear Witness, 1942 to 1945. Diary of the Nazi Years, Victor Klemperer. This is an outstanding volume, and he tells about everything we have to go through. And he also talks about the media reports and what people were talking about in the streets about the glorious victories in the Eastern Front when they were getting their asses kicked daily. So this is an eyewitness account of 1942 to 45 in Berlin, of a Jewish man who basically survived to tell. And this is a great document, great historical document, and it's wonderful that we still have it. And it's very prescient, and also says a lot about our times too. Curse of the superlative, how everything, like when George W. Bush was saying, the Iraq War is going great, and then the insurgency came up in Fallujah, and then he had to drop a bunch of depleted uranium bombs on it, and basically killed hundreds of thousands of people, and it's just disgusting. But I mean, I Will Bear Witness is salient to our times. Is basically my main point. Okay, here's a classic that if you are a living human being and you have not read Boccaccio's Decameron, you are missing out. This is a fat book. I will admit it. Over 800 pages. But all these stories on days, they pick days, and they each these 9 people who were avoiding the plague out in the countryside, and they tell stories to amuse themselves and to stay interested and to live and to enjoy life. And there's a message in that. There's a message in, avoiding the plague is not in fear and in obedience to so-called authorities. I'm not going to go any further than that, but it's in, hey, finding reserve. Well, of course, these people were these characters are, I imagine, and the way they're talked about and their names and stuff. Their names all mean something. They have different characters. And half women and half men. And the stories are great. A lot of funny, sexual stuff. A lot of heartbreaking stuff too. Really great story about a nobleman who has his only belonging is a falcon that he loves, and it's falconry was huge back then. And a beautiful woman that he was in love with, and who he went poor for, basically, came to visit him for a dinner, and he didn't have anything to cook. So guess what? He cooked that falcon that he loved for her, and they sat and ate it. And he loved that dinner, but afterwards, it's a heartbreaking story. But there's funny stories, there's heartbreaking stories. Decameron is just, it's something else. It's a beautiful book, and I recommend it to anyone who has a heart and who has a sense of humor, and also who enjoys reading. And next up is another book by Victor Klemperer, which is an essential book for anyone to read. To understand, it's Victor Klemperer's The Language of the Third Reich. And in it he talks about how language is a weapon of war, and how it is used through propaganda, through media, through all kinds of stuff. And how the things that people say and how they couch them is very important. And he goes through it. He goes through it point by point. And he talks about how language basically led a lot of intelligent people into supporting policies that were horrific. And we see this in modern times. And this book is very, again, much like the I Will Bear Witness, this book is very important to read and to understand basically a lot of the nonsense that people are accepting. WMDs, all this, the threats that are no threat, and yet they're somehow threats. And we have to wage wars of annihilation and put people in camps and imprison them and shit. Stuff, pardon my language. I mean, it's still resonant. It still resonates in our times. So that's all I'm going to say. Next up, Sade Mon Prochain. Sade, My Neighbor, by Pierre Klosowski. This is an interesting book. It goes into the works of de Sade and how de Sade necessarily wasn't just a libertine or anything. He was an atheist, and he was a capitalist, and he was the philosopher villain, and he was happy to play it. And how a lot of the modern theorists and stuff, especially French theorists, were followed his work a lot and took a lot from his work. That's all I'm going to say on that. All right, next up, it's probably D.H. Lawrence's best work, Women in Love, by D.H. Lawrence. And this is, of course, the succeeding volume to The Rainbow, and it's a good novel. Lawrence is all right, and that's all I'm going to say about that. And then the 2-volume set of Vasari's Lives of the Artists, and I'll tell you, these are gems. It starts out with early Italian history, Ghiberti Giotto, Cimabue, I think, and Brunelleschi, the famous stores, and Botticelli, and goes up all the way to Titian. And then you have a second volume of the later artists, where you get Sansovino, Salviati, Romano, Andrea del Sarto, Cosimo, Perugino, Bellini. Bellini's interesting. Veneziano, Castellano, Michelozzo, Lozzi, Robbia, Pisano. Great stuff. Vasari writes very well on the artistic trends of the Renaissance from early to late. Good stuff. Now here's some top tier books, two of them, meaning that I brought them on top of the back row. Okay, this is Ludovico Ariosto, great satirist, great poet. This is his epic Orlando Furioso, and it's part 2. I have part 1. It's in the back row. And this is probably one of the most entertaining and funniest and bloodiest epics ever written. And it's voluminous. This is just one volume, by the way. The other volume is just as fat. And it's an outstanding book. I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. Next up is another novel, and I'm happy to say that the town I was born in, Terre Haute, Indiana, is mentioned in this novel, and it's William Gaddis, Jr. And of course, I'm sure people know about this. It's about free enterprise in America, and it's about an 11-year-old capitalist, eagerly following an example of a grasping the world around him, and it's just it's basically about the infantile nature, the infantile and yet cruel nature of capitalism in the United States, and it's probably one of the best books written on American culture in the 20th century. It's that good, and it's as the blurb says, some of the blurb says, it's a biting satire of the American dream, and it's written in a very distinct way. It's when you get into it, it's going to take you about 30 to 40 pages until you get used to the different narrative style. And that's all I'm going to say. But it's really good. It's a really good book, and I like the stock stock certificate. That's the cover photo. It's so perfect. Penguin really knows how to do this stuff, folks. All right, that's it for today. Have a great day, folks. Take care.